followers did the same, but maintained their adherence to Shabbatei Zevi and the Kabbalistic doctrine in secret. And they survive to this day as a sect known as the Domne.
How do you spell that?
I can't remember the exact spelling. I always confuse it. It's Doehmeme or Do something like that. Doemeh, I think.
Okay. And this is a secret society or a sect?
They're secret Jews who basically pose as Muslims.
Okay.
I found a fascinating article recently on the internet about one member of the Domne community, because it's a real problem in Turkey because they are very powerful in the country and they serve a lot of posts within the Turkish government. Except they have Muslim names that they pray in mosques and so on and so forth, but they also have other practices that they do on the Sabbath and so on and so forth. And so this one member of the community, he believes that it's time for them to come out and declare who they are and to stop living in secret. So he's receiving a lot of flack from the community for this, and who fear what exposure might mean to them. And the problem is that almost all of the members of the Young Turk movement who were involved in the overthrow of the Ottoman Empire were members of the Domne sect. And according to Gershom Scholem himself, he claims that Ataturk was a Domne as well. And now, so the branch of the Domne in Europe were centered in Poland, and their leader was Jacob Frank, who did very much this, except he didn't convert to Islam. His belief was that it was necessary for his people to convert to Christianity, and they did. And they assumed Christian names, and a lot of them intermarried into Austrian aristocracy. My understanding is they were linked to Maria Theresa and sort of merged with her family.
Okay.
And so Rabbi Antelman claims that Rothschilds were Shabbatarians.
Right.
And which explains a lot. It explains because the development of Kabbalah, even according to Gershom Scholem, hits its high point essentially. Like the trajectory that he traces for Kabbalah is 12th century emergence that I talked about. Then most importantly, Isaac Luria, who's the great modern reformer of Kabbalah. Okay. And then it is Shabbatei Zevi, who is sort of the great formulator of Lurianic Kabbalah, and then Zevi succeeded by Frank.
And I think that Jacob Frank or Jakob Frank, he was wasn't he believed that he was like the reincarnation of Shabbatai Zevi or something like that?
Exactly, he did. And now his nephew creates the Asiatic Brethren, who are naming themselves after the Sabians of Haran, essentially, or the Mandaeans, whatever. But the idea is the same Johannite sect that the Templars had been in contact with. And there's also the concept in Scottish Rite Freemasonry is that the Templars actually rescued a number of these Eastern mystics and brought them to Scotland. And that this is supposedly then the origin of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. Presumably then that's how they entered the bloodline as well.
So do you think, sorry to cut you off there, but do you think that this also then potentially might explain the idea of, if we talk about Freemasonry, for instance, they allegedly don't care, so to speak, if you have a belief in Allah or in God or Yahweh or who whatever God you can pick and choose, basically, as long as you believe in a deity that is above yourself,
Lucifer.
Right?
Exactly.
Okay.
I think that's very much the key. People, the concept is people wonder what roles the Illuminati prefer to play, and the usual assumption would be politicians, but the truth is usually as religious leaders. And because if I found any belief that they hold in common, the belief that I found is the notion that if you look at Leo Strauss, Plato, Jamal Afghani, they all held to this belief that people are weak that they are unable to accept the truth, which is that there is no truth. So they need myths to be led, and so they believe that people need religion, that they need some, according to them, phantom. They need to believe in some phantom in the sky and an afterlife and things like that,
right.
to comfort them from the dark reality in their minds. Well, so they believe that that you can't just come forward and tell people how it is, that you have to use religion to manipulate them, and this is what they all believe. So whether it's Buddhism or Islam or Christianity or Judaism, they will usually tend to use these religion, or it's communism or democracy. There's many other cults that they manipulate, right?
Sure.
That they use to manipulate people. So yes, you'll find them posing as various types of religious reformers, but really they're all part of the same agenda.
Well, it doesn't matter in that sense, as you say, because it's all about disempowering the human beings on this planet to the that's the main agenda as I see it, and it doesn't matter in what form you encapsulate that or whatever. And also, I think that this, what you mentioned about that they've been, that they believe that people are not prone to take care of themselves, they need leaders, they need some kind of religious guidance or what have you. To this day, this probably, unfortunately, is kind of true because they have worked, what I was getting at is basically that what their idea or their philosophy then is that people need to be led either by a leader or a belief in God or whatever. And I think that to this day that's probably actually true because they themselves, many of these groups and religious orders from the get-go, has been very instrumental in breaking down the human being, meaning that they haven't given the space that to discover themselves. They haven't been given the space in order to understand themselves and to develop on their own. They have been very much the power have been taken away from them, which means that they become very susceptible to a leader or a power lead or an idea of a god, right? So I mean, it's a relationship there that the leaders, at least today and previously in history, of course, as well, they want to take the power away from us in order to put themselves in a position where they can guide civilization, where they can rule over people and decide, what is right and what is wrong, basically.
I think I think the root part of the problem is people are not enough aware of the threat of hypocrites. To use a simple word, but I'm using the word. What I mean is imposters, really, because even if you look at the New Testament, and Jesus warned against hypocrites as well, and it's very much a concern in the Quran. I mean, it's repeated over and over and over, and I think the people just don't, Christians, Muslims, whoever, they just don't realize the role that imposters play, because it's not to say that there is no God or that the basis of these religions is not true or accurate. I believe that it is. It's just that it's manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like a guy like George Bush. All he has to do is say he's Christian, and then people will accept anything, and the Christians will accept anything that he says.
Mm.
And the same way that that these Muslim reformers, they'll use all the right language, they'll refer to this scholar and that scholar and this tradition and, and have all kinds of proof, supposed proof for the things that they're claiming. But the Muslims are just not wary enough of the fact that people will try to mislead them, and they will try to mislead them through the religion.
Mm.
This is, I find this is one of the big lessons, and this is exactly how guys like Jamal Afghani and Bin Laden and the Ayatollah and all these imposters have basically used the naive trust of Muslims and other imposters of any other religion to and this is exactly what the neoconservatives believed in as well too. They recognized that to achieve their objectives, that they were going to have to gain the support of the Christian community. And most of these guys have Zionist leanings, but they recognized that they had They had to shroud their doctrines in
Christian terms,
in Christian language,
yes,
so that they could basically derive the support of the Christian community, and they have,
yeah,
just by appending Christian terminology or whatever it took to do it, but it works.
Do you also think that because let's say to the rest of the world that's outside the U.S., many people in Europe or what have you are looking at these leaders and say, oh my God, they are Christian, they are the most evil people there is, so let's not go there in our ideology in that sense. Do you think that religion in that sense has played out its role? It's definitely very much influential still, obviously. I mean, there are millions, dedicated to the Roman Catholic Church, for instance. There are a lot of, Muslims, obviously. But do you think that they're slowly trying to phase out religion as the source that people should turn to, so to speak, for guidance?
Absolutely, because we call it religion, but all it means is it's self-knowledge, and and I mean self-centeredness in a good sense, like self. I can't think of another word for it.
But I think I know what you mean. You're not talking about egoism here, but you're talking about self-discovery and responsibility and living your own life and not someone else's, right?
Exactly. And so it's just, recognizing God is just recognizing an ultimate reality and an order and a good and a purpose. And this is the very basis that people are longing for, to understand. And then is to understand, how do you serve that? And it's very simple. You just serve that by seeking justice, by believing that things should be just, that there's a moral order that should be followed, not the opposite, which is what the Illuminati was teaching, is that there is no moral order, and that it's a struggle for the fittest, that there's some who are superior and the rest who are a bunch of losers, and so the superior ones have the right to rule over and deceive, if necessary, the rest. That's the opposite.
Right, and the thing is that that I want to put in there is that they don't ask anyone for permission, so to speak. They just act. They just do what they want to do, and either people are foolish enough to go along with it, if you will, or they stand up against it. Many people who have of course been picked off the main stage, so to speak, and are not around anymore. But ultimately, I see that this is a very much an individual battle, meaning that if you're smart enough or clever enough, you can just phase out of all these other ideologies, all these other political schemes, whatever it is, basically, that is trying to get into your head and rule you and make you think in their terms, so to speak.
I agree totally. And that's the thing, is that really religion is supposed to be very much an individual relationship. It's you're accountable for yourself. So you can't rely on these teachers all over the place to tell you what you're supposed to believe. You have to assess it on your own terms. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's a huge step. So it's very easy for people to say they're Christian or they're Muslim, but it's a whole other step for them to say that I fear God alone. I leave the final judgment for what I believe is true between myself and God, and because that's how people get misled. And this is the same problem that goes back, 5, 6, 7,000 years. You look back, this is exactly what happened to Judaism. This is how it got corrupted, is that people lost the basic simplicity of what it meant as far as their personal transformation, and they turned it into a cult.
Right. I mean, the priesthoods are taking over the power, and that's the main, that's the wrong step that the people do, that they align themselves to human beings and their ideologies instead of their own, as you say, either if one has a belief in a higher source or a God or whatever, I mean, that's fine. That doesn't bother me or shouldn't bother anyone else as well. But they're very smart and clever because they know how to sidestep that, I think, initial and very, very, honest approach to a spiritual life, if you will, on this planet. That okay, something is probably up there, bigger than me, or out there, or nature, the universe, or God, whatever it might be. But this is being sidetracked all the time and hijacked, if you will.
Right.